With that, I'm going to turn over to Ranking Member Senator Scott Brown. I want to thank you, Scott, for inviting us to come today, giving us a chance to display this Father's Day here, and to have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. Getting to the end of a huge celebration of Lord's victory, have a chance to see our youngest son, Ben, and to enjoy some of one of the most beautiful weekends I can remember in a long time, and to be here with all of you in this very, very special place today. Scott, thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm honored that you're here as well. And I know you and your family have very close ties here in Boston. It's good to see your wife again. I appreciate you taking the opportunity to hold this hearing and try to address a lot of the things that we've talked about, which is the waste, fraud, and abuse, and how to do it better, as you noted. And I want to thank Mayor Menino for allowing us to hold this hearing in such an historic venue. Also, I'd like to obviously thank you and your team. They've been very zealous and gracious in dealing with me and my staff and trying to zero in on this very important issue. And I've said publicly many times I commend your bipartisanship in chairing this subcommittee. There's never been a time where we felt that we haven't been getting a fair shake. And we've, through the hearings that we've had, we've done a tremendous amount to change the culture in Washington and forcing many of these entities to do it better. And as you know, protecting our national fish stocks, moreover fishing is a national imperative that requires good management backed by consensus science. And today I will try to provide a voice to the many fishermen throughout New England and echo the voices of many other elected officials in this state, including Congressman Barney Frank and John Tierney, and Congressman Tierney is going to speak in a moment. Mayor Lang is here, and Mayor Kirk is coming, Senator Tyler, Representative Ferrante, and many others who have worked tirelessly in bringing attention to us the plight of the New England fishermen and the abuses of the Washington agency NOAA in dealing with some of these issues. As you all know, fishing is a century-old Massachusetts tradition, but most importantly, it's a homegrown modern industry that employs thousands of hard-working people who put food on America's tables. NOAA's history of overzealous enforcement in the New England fishery has come at the cost of fishermen's trust and their livelihood. And many of them tell me that the folks in Washington regard them as criminals instead of a legitimate, valued, regulated industry. And while I want to emphasize that our fishing regulations must be enforced, we must not forget that fishing is about catching fish, where 96% of the violations are in fact civil matters. Yet the tone and tenor of enforcement must reflect this. For example, Washington sanctioned agents carry guns and 90% are criminal investigators. So we have a situation where armed criminal investigators are primarily enforcing non-criminal regulations, essentially issuing tickets. The Federal Aviation Administration, for example, Mr. Chairman, which regulates an industry where an error can lead to a large-scale disaster, has 0 criminal investigators. That's none. And if they don't need them, I have to wonder why they're being used so prominently in the fishing industry. So it's clear to me that some of the abuses we'll hear about today have been discussed long before I got involved, incentivized to fill the coffers of the asset forfeiture fund, which uses the proceeds from enforcement activities to further fund enforcement action. And the AFF was treated like a piggy bank almost. And we've seen this before in other agencies by Washington headquarters and the overseers of the NOAA office, the Office of Law Enforcement, the Office of General Counsel for Enforcement Litigation, which had accounting practices that would have made Enron and other entities blush. In fact, the KPMG review found the fund to be in disarray, with no one at NOAA able to explain how it worked. And predictably, NOAA's law enforcement officers and attorneys went on a spending spree, funded by the hardworking fishermen. For example, as you referenced, they purchased more than 202 vehicles, yet only had an enforcement staff of 172, and a luxurious boat, which you can actually see right here, at a cost of $300,000. CBS News says it was used for fishing. We know about the credit card abuse that was referenced in the report. And while we've asked for many documents, Mr. Chairman, for this hearing, we've only received about 20% of the documents we actually received came late Friday. And I'm encouraged also by the audit that was done. But remember, they only went from April of 10 to March of 11. They don't take into account the $96 million of monies that have come in and the $49 million that have gone out. Where's the rest of the money? And I think it's very important, as we do in every other hearing, every find out where that money is and how it's being used. And you would think a fund like this would have tight supervision over the years, but only 16 months ago the NOAA comptroller was given control of this fund, which draws fines from many statutory sources established decades ago. And despite the unyielding exactness that NOAA used in collecting these fines, they couldn't tell the Inspector General the balance of the fund until, except for the recent time period that you were referencing, or even a definition of the fund until last Thursday. So finally, after ignoring the problem for decades, and only when facing intense congressional scrutiny, not only by the House but by the Senate as well, was NOAA able to subject its AFF financial statements to an audit. And as you referenced, I'm encouraged by some of the steps that have been taken by NOAA, and I want to continue to, as we've done in the past, provide any guidance or help that they need to do it better. And I'm hopeful that we'll continue to be able to work with them in the future. However, the fact that NOAA's Washington leadership is celebrating the absolute bare minimum of financial transparency, just by the lack of documentation that they provided our office, some very basic things, tells me just about where they're coming from. And I feel it's incumbent upon NOAA to rebuild the trust of fishermen and of its elected officials that represent them. To do that, NOAA must account for the money paid by the fishermen as fines and examine if it's being used properly. And we must do more, as you referenced. And I know I'll follow up and will continue to follow up in order to find out exactly where the monies are and how they're going to be spent and what we can do to do it better. And I will add for the record that I requested and gave NOAA 3 weeks to produce documents, as I referenced, and not a single page was produced until Friday afternoon, right before the Father's Day weekend. And I can't help but wonder whether NOAA would tolerate the same kind of behavior out of a Massachusetts fisherman if they were asked to provide the same type of documentation. And we've seen stonewalling like this before, Mr. Chairman, in Congress with other entities. It's even more concerning given the history of making documents disappear. As you know, and we read in November of 9, while facing litigation and an Inspector General review, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer directed the shredding of 75 to 80% of the files in his office. So when we talk about going back to help other fishermen, I'm hopeful we can do that based on the shredding of many of those documents. And the Inspector General also confirmed that 9 complaints against NOAA involving false information and affidavit entry into a facility for other than authorized purposes, excessive fines, steep assessed penalties in the northeastern region, basically deter respondents from taking the cases to a hearing. And I also reference, as you do, Secretary Locke has appointed a distinguished federal judge as a special master to review a lot of these cases. And in 2 cases, he found that NOAA, in fact, abused its power. We had the case of Captain Buchanan. The special master found that the NOAA lawyers had unduly pressured him by unfairly delaying the sale of his vessel and extracting an impressive penalty. And then they would, in turn, he had to sell the family farm. And I know you heard that testimony. I'm looking forward to it. There are many other stories here, Mr. Chairman, and some of which, and I recognize as you are, we're not here to talk about fishing per se. We're here to talk about the money that was collected, where it is, where it's going, what it's doing, and we need to find a way to do it better. We have to have reestablish that trust between the Washington bureaucrats who deal in this issue and the fishermen. It's very important to do that, and I feel if we don't, Mr. Chairman, we're going to be in deep trouble. So I want to thank you once again for your hearing about changing the culture in Washington. I've said it many times, and I take it to heart for your leadership, and I know that I do appreciate you taking time to come out and visit our fine city, and look forward to the remaining part of the hearing.
Thanks very much for that statement, and again for publishing this here to today. Our first witness, we have 3 panels. The first panel is one person, and he is a congressman from the 8th, 6th district. What is that? What district do you live in?
We with Congressman